Welcome back. On this episode of AI Meets API, host Ajay Konda, CGO of ProwessSoft, sits down with Ajay Kumar, Senior Director of AI Product Management for Salesforce. With 18 years in the tech industry, Ajay Kumar has scaled products and engineered solutions across multi-cloud environments, with expertise spanning MuleSoft, Salesforce Platform, Marketing Cloud, and Commerce Cloud. Over to you, Ajay.
Thank you, Amy. And Ajay, it's very rare to say welcome, Ajay.
Thank you.
So good to have you here, Ajay. And you are one of a very fascinating person ever we had on the show. And one thing, right? You have been in the product space, developing things, and you're a builder. And then you have done a lot of solution engineering, and then you are doing a lot of AI stuff right now. So, can you give your journey through how integration played a key role or integration played across your journey of the career?
Yeah, it's a good one. Thank you, firstly, for having me on the show. I've been a listener of some of your previous guests, and I found it really interesting that they had different point of views to share, and I'm always looking at listening others' point of view. So thank you for bringing me over. For me, the integration journey really started with my work with Microsoft, and this goes back to Microsoft SSIS, SQL Server Integration Services. Back then, it was a way, because I started my career with Microsoft right out of college, it was a way to actually bring systems together, and that was Microsoft's topology. It was about data pipeline, application pipeline, and a lot of that. So I was a part of that team and gradually then moved over to the SQL part of the business, which later became more consulting and advisory. And the integration journey really is an interesting one because you're almost looking at it from both the developer but also a product mindset. And later on, when I jumped ships to join the startup called as HackerRank, it was all about building the right platform for hiring and recruiting developers out there. So many of you who are watching this, if you're a developer, at some point in your career, you would have given a HackerRank test. So I was possibly responsible for some of those creations. And from there, I majorly pivoted back to a more enterprise world. And having spent time across a variety of Salesforce products, I think integration is still a very important thing because, as you might know, Salesforce has grown organically over the last 25 years. We are down to about our 80th or 78th, 79th acquisition. And all of these products have come together and they're working so seamlessly with each other. It wouldn't happen without us thinking about deeply integrating it. And of course, in 2017, 2016, we bought over MuleSoft, and that was probably the amazing acquisition that changed the direction of how applications and systems start talking to each other. And I was very privileged to be a part of that journey, moving over from APAC as a market and then coming over to EMEA based out of London, helping build the solution engineering team here, and eventually graduating out of that to move into a more AI-driven world of the product side. I think even on this side of the world, I still feel integration will continue to play a major role, and I believe the relevance still continues.
Good to know the background and especially the HackerRank. Yeah, that's a big thing. Yeah, we use that to sometimes for our selection of the new recruitees.
I see. Great.
So one big idea that's going across the board is this agentic enterprise. So you are the best person who transitioned from core integration into the complete agent force side. How do you see it differently from all other kind of talk we usually hear from the other people in the AI side? Like if you see a lot of the people come from the Salesforce side, right? So their view of the agentic enterprise or agentic AI is different from the people who come from the integration space.
Right.
Do you see it differently, or is it the same, or what are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question, particularly where I am looking at it and how I look at it is largely because this enterprise of artificial intelligence based agents that we are all now seeing coming up around us are not going to be operating in silo. They will continue to talk to each other. They will continue to have dependencies across the vast enterprise applications and systems that are already deployed and have been running for a while now. So in that kind of an era, it cannot just stay in that silo mindset, as I said, and needs to have that unilateral agreement of how that integration comes to play. Integration, as we know it, traditionally started off as, like, if you go way back, middleware technology slowly evolving into an API-led approach to a more modern way of an architecture of mesh of applications. I personally feel at some stage we will get into this agentic mesh, more or less, where naturally or unnaturally companies will start interacting with their agents to an external agent. And it's a maturity journey, to be honest. Where we are right now as the whole universe around us is we're probably seeing the first set of agents being created. I almost treat it as, like, in Salesforce we call them as 3 class of agents: monophonic, polyphonic, and ensemble. I can talk through them. What does it mean? Monophonic agents is probably what we are seeing right now, where an agent is probably just being invoked by a user. It is either on a chat, or it could be on a voice chat, or it could be on another channel, and you're asking a question and you're returning a response back. And it's just probably just doing that. Very limited integration is not that wide and deep. But as we move into the more polyphonic, you'll actually see these agents being able to interact with each other, but also being able to widely interact with a lot more other systems. And as this evolves into a more ensemble of agents, you'll start to see like a supervisory agent coming on top. Just like how we have teams and then managers and other layers of management, we'll probably see the same structure coming for agents. And none of that will work if there is no strong integration topology in place. So I think that plays a very important role.
Oh, okay. I was about to ask you about the integration evaluation. Now you already answered it for me. AI is speeding up. Going back to your 3 types of the AI agents are getting built. Thing that is trending a lot is the MCP and A2A protocol. If I understand correct, polyphonic is where you see a lot of MCP, and Ensemble is where you'll see a lot of A2A. Is that a current assumption? Or?
That's almost, you're almost there. Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's an evolving definition, so I wouldn't like put a pin on it. MCP as we know it today is what it is, but 6 months from now, a year from now, what would the state of MCP would look like? Absolutely no clue. I think we need to be in a mindset of adopting quickly, moving fast to that change. And you all saw what is happening with the latest launch of models. GPT-5 came out yesterday, and there will be a bunch of other models that will come out. And we at Salesforce are talking about Agentforce, which definitely reaches and talks to all these models outside. But the best thing that Salesforce does really well is we deploy intelligence closer to our customer's business context. And customer's business context lies as a part of the CRM application, as a part of the multiple clouds that we have, which in turn get connected to their enterprise. It could be an SAP system talking to Salesforce. It could be an ERP system talking to Salesforce, or a banking application. And agents deployed on top of all of this will be able to use this rich context and then give the right action that needs to be taken.
So many times this MCP is getting compared with APIs a lot. So when do you use API versus MCP, or how do they coexist from an AI point of view?
Good question. So traditionally, APIs have been like the way to connect systems, right? Like they have been so proliferant that you probably have a very well-defined, a very mature standard of APIs that any company would have now, or any application. Where we look at MCP is the first time, if you dial back a few months ago now, appears almost like years ago. Anthropic, once they launched the MCP protocol, Model Context Protocol, the idea behind that was, how do we go and access a bunch of tools, resources that those tools would expose, and any particular prompts that are a part of that system or set of systems. And they said this should be a new interface to actually go and talk to these kind of resources, prompts, and tooling. What happens with an API is you're almost predefining the kind of entities or endpoints that you're going to expose through that API. with MCP, I think the definition could be much larger. And because what we are dealing with, these large language models are non-deterministic entities, with an API, you almost have to be very predictive of the kind of response or an action that you can get. But because you do not know the way in which these models could very well behave or respond, of course, you want to control their behavior. You want to have a little more broader context, which is definitely made possible with an MCP. So coming back to your question, the way I see the world evolving is all APIs which have been traditionally built, which have been now in function, can be so easily wrapped and exposed as an MCP endpoint. And I think that's the lightweight engineering lift without actually having to write a lot of code or even any code. That could be done. And a good example is what MuleSoft has done, particularly by giving developers an opportunity to build MCP tooling. And this is a way in which suddenly any API out there could be exposed as an MCP endpoint for agents to interact with. And I think that's a great segue or evolution of what is the next stage of evolution of APIs. For now, it is looking like MCP is a great way for agents to consume, but I think APIs will still continue to be relevant, still very key and important, because not everything will be exposed as an MCP endpoint at the end of the day.
Okay, got it. One thing I know from last year is we spoke a lot about the topic center, where APIs can become a topic center for the agents to access it. Now we are talking about MCP as another source of both topic and action. What is the other changes coming up in this space, especially exposing data to the AI and also getting actions from the AI?
Good question. Particularly for me, I think while I was still there on the MuleSoft side, back then, Topic Center was one of those early thought decisions taken by our product team to think about what do these agents need? Agents need a way into reaching out into applications and then take action. And this was like a foresight I think we applied from MuleSoft side to even think that far ahead, that there should be something called as Topic Center, where as instructions and prompts will be written, topics could be a way to go and fetch that API from a registry of topics or registry of APIs. And this was all pre-MCP era, right? Once MCP came in, I think that definitely has taken a higher priority on the order of how we actually package it. I wouldn't still keep away the topic center. It's still very relevant because you'll still find customers who may not be willing to expose everything through MCP, but they still want to deal with agents and they want to package up their APIs to be exposed as an API catalog that could be invoked as an action. And I think in those variations, because MuleSoft as a company of as a part under the Salesforce has already been innovating into these multiple streams, you'll see us catering to a variety of customers. Imagine if we didn't have API registry or the API catalog, topic center particularly, then the only proliferated way would have been through the MCP route. But now, if there is customers who are not yet willing to experiment with MCP, may still go back to the well-tested pre-MCP route. And I think this is one of the multitude of options that we give out today.
Is there any other new options are coming up, Ajay?
I think what's happening right now is we're paying attention to how developers are using the product, how developers are actually even continuing to build agents outside the market. And of course, I recently published a very interesting observation that I've been having for a long time on what does it mean for somebody who's trying to create their own agentic stack without actually looking at it from a scale perspective, challenges that they have to go through. So it's probably what our CEO says, DIY, right? And what we have seen is there's a lot of proliferation. DIY is great when you're sort of doing a demo and building proof of concept. But as somebody starts to take those DIY approaches to move it into an enterprise scale, or even through the manageability of that life cycle, that's when it starts to tear down, and there's a lot of bottlenecks at each stage. So that's one of the articles that I'd probably recommend. It's now on our Salesforce blog. It talks about the engineering principles that typically we take care of. And it's a good approach to think about and keeping our eyes and ears open right now. That's what's happening. MCP going back to that topic, I would say it's still evolving, right? And the reason why I mentioned it's still evolving is a couple of weeks ago, we all saw in the public news a bunch of MCP servers were leaking data or hijacked or hacked. And what does that indicate is not all MCP servers are very secure. But what we've done at MuleSoft and what we are doing together at Salesforce is we're launching these approaches of how do we open up the gates for with MCP. And we are thinking about the layers of trust, guardrail as the first principle. And that is the reason why you're seeing us doing it in a stage by stage manner rather than saying, hey, we are fully MCP ready. No, we are not. Percent true that Salesforce is doing this in stages just to be sure that we are battle testing, because once you open up those tools, resources, and prompts, it's almost opening up like the doors of your main house for anybody to enter in without auth credential. You'll have to be very, very careful about what you and how you present.
Okay, got it. Let me go a little deeper. I think I have a lot of questions on what you just said. Let me start with, I will definitely reference that blog, what you mentioned in the notes. Is predominantly whatever the use cases you have seen so far in this journey with the agent force, are they more tailored for the sales and service
Good question.
type of use cases, or you are seeing a lot more use cases beyond that or that are possible?
Yeah, this is typically like if you had asked me this question last month and the month before, you would have seen a change of answer, because that's how typically things are changing. So I can give you a broader spectrum of what's really happening right now. We're launching and working across three major category of agent types. The first one I would almost put it as a foreground agent, anything that sits in the foreground. And the other one I would almost classify them as background agents, something that is completely headless, buried deep inside. You wouldn't even know there's an agent sitting and listening. And the third category is what we call as employee agents. That's almost internal to the company, doesn't interact with the external world in terms of any data exchange. It could have applications that could connect, etc. But the use case is largely for companies and employees within the company to deal with. And I can give you some of the examples. And to your question more specifically, I think we started off by seeing a base classification of sales and service cloud. And of course, there are other clouds that Salesforce has. Those would be the base category of agents. And off the top, the highest proliferation started becoming the customer service use case, because that was the topmost priority, I think, for folks and enterprises outside in the world to say, hey, I want to take care of my customer, and can I put an agent instead of a bot? And I think at this stage, I want to clearly draw a demarcation. What's the difference between an agent and a bot? Because people often tend to say, hey, it looks like one and the same, but how can you really differentiate an agent and a bot? So if I have to tell you in simple terms, the biggest difference between an agent and a bot is an agent can reason and take action. Bot sometimes can take an action, but otherwise it does not even reason at any stage. So that is the clear demarcation I would like to draw. And going back, customer service use case, topmost. Then comes a lot of other use cases that we launched around sales, which is sales coach. You saw BDR agents, SDR agents, and then all of the other clouds that are part of the Salesforce ecosystem have their own agentic approaches. And what we are seeing is, interestingly, customers are taking these agent types and deploying it to their environments depending on their topmost use case. A good example I would like to state at this stage is what we have done with Heathrow, for example. Heathrow is one of those popular, one of the busiest airports in the world. And it's home to me here now in London. I transit to Heathrow at least once a month, if not more. And what happens is every time you transit through Heathrow, there are these people wearing these purple t-shirts at Heathrow called as Heathrow ambassadors. Their main job is to help with directions and things like that. That was a human standing and doing that. And that could not scale beyond a point because there were so many other people flowing in and they had to address the traffic. So Heathrow has been a long-standing customer of ours. They use a bunch of clouds with us. And the main goal was, hey, what type of agent makes sense for us? So, and where should we place it? Should we put it on a application? Should we put it on a website? Where should we place this? So that it is very easy for our passengers. And while you're traveling, you already have like 100 other things to worry about. Interacting with the agent is the last thing that you will ever think about. Right? So after a long discussion, we decided, okay, and this was again mutually agreed, and them directing us, saying, hey, this is the best place. You'll actually find we've deployed the Heathrow agent on WhatsApp.
Okay.
So you're,
Because
of course, interacting with your family or friends, or you're typing away on WhatsApp. So Heathrow agent appears as a contact in WhatsApp now if you scan a QR code in one of the corners of the Heathrow airport. And the best part is the agent can answer a lot of questions about, hey, how do I get from this terminal to this terminal? Where is the next nearest launch? And it'll ask you questions like, when you ask it a question like that, it'll ask you, where are you? Are you before security or after security? And based on that, it can tell you the approximate time it takes for you to walk and things like that. And if it cannot answer a question, which I also tried, what will it do if it doesn't know the answer to that question? We also built a human in the loop escalation. So a real human will come into your WhatsApp on the same contact object and answer that question. Once the chat is finished, they go off.
wow, that's wonderful. This is the
So
first time
just
I'm
giving you a
hearing it.
longer context, but imagine this is what we've done for Heathrow right now, but you can imagine the future opportunities. And the reason I'm talking about Heathrow is they're a publicly referenceable story, and there are a lot many such success stories that we've done, and we're really starting to see the world open up. And I think, as you said, it's a very early phase of that agent journey. As and when customers and more companies start adopting and bringing this together, we'll start seeing, of course, more complex use cases coming to light as well.
That's great. Yeah, definitely it explains a lot of things that definitely Salesforce is doing beyond the sales and service cloud use cases. And especially this is amazing because I keep hearing about human in the loop, but now hearing exactly the live use case, live application which is doing it, it will be wonderful. Especially every one of us might have traveled multiple airports. Yeah, this will
Sure.
be really helpful.
Sure. And because we're speaking of multiple agents, right? There's one thing that I often get asked, like, how do I really see what my agents are doing? Because agent observability is one of the biggest topics right now. And
Okay.
I almost didn't have a great answer if you had asked me a few months ago, because there's so many different reports, dashboards that you can go and look at. Hey, this is what the agent is doing. But we, as a company, Salesforce, decided to bring it all together. And now we announced a month ago now on our Agentforce 3.0 launch something called as Command Center. So Command Center gives you a single pane of glass of all the things that you can look at what the agent is doing. Where did it actually not tell the right answer? What failed? You can actually go right in and inspect. So I think it's a great way in which we sort of provided this. And this, if you mirror this thought and go back to what we have in MuleSoft, it's like looking at the API tree in our report, where you can actually see the three-tiered architecture, and you can actually look, hey, which API didn't actually work, or where did it actually fail? And that was fascinating. For the first time when I actually looked at MuleSoft many years ago, I was fascinated by how you could do that level of analysis.
That's great. One thing I'm very curious to know, Ajay, is you helped many customers, especially regional one, right? So there is a lot of adoption going on, or a lot of talk going in the US, but now you are in the EMEA region. How do you see when you talk to the stakeholders in the US, or the customers in US, or the stakeholders versus in the Europe? Do you see the pretty similar type of adoption going on, or is there a more resistance or things? Let's see some proof point before we get into these things.
Got it. No, I think each market is looking at it through the lens of how much they can experiment. You're absolutely right. And I think what's happened is in the last 1.5 years, you've actually seen each of these countries rolling out their own AI governance and local laws as well. So again, there is that adherence that they are applying, but there's also that willingness to experiment. And what I'm particularly seeing, going back to your question, is EMEA, there are these pockets of different markets where there's a lot more enthusiasm to experiment and jump right in here in London. But I sort of largely look after EMEA as a portfolio market for my current role. And what I'm seeing is there are markets which are very niche, as like we have a Norway, Oslo, where there's you would imagine they would probably be somewhere in the later stages of evolving and adopting some of these agentic approaches. But no, one of our marquee customers, remarkable, if you used one of their e-ink tablets, they are a company which we decided, let's go fully head-on agent first or AI first. And they're a small company, 50, 60 employees. They decided we do not want to put more employees in our workforce because we cannot scale for customer service. So they pushed their customer service operations, a majority portion of it, to be fully AI driven. What I'm also seeing is there is a lot of different industries that are adopting this at a different pace. Particularly financial services industry has been very active in doing a lot of experiments. And from last year to this year, I think there is at least an 80% increase of budgets that CIOs and CTOs are willing to put on the table. And the CEO is almost putting this on their board agenda to have an AI initiative in the company, which actually brings us to every discussion with such companies. And that's where, in the order of priority, it almost becomes like, which is the first use case that you want to start with? And I think US has its own pace of how they adopts. EMEA has its own pace, and APAC as well, because I work in a team where we are globally distributed. I have a counterpart who's in APAC. I have a counterpart who sits in AMER, and we sort of compare notes with each other. Each one of us sees a different perspective, and that is very well that, customers are sometimes global themselves. Like some of the brands are multi-geos. They are looking at which is the best market for us to start the first use case. Should we start in AMER? Should we start in EMEA first? Or should we start in APAC? Those are some of the other decisions as well.
Okay, sounds good. Throughout this journey, right, moving from a product to the integration space to the AI space, what are your, or even within the AI space, you have been here for a couple of years, what is kind of surprises or things you have seen? Okay, this could have taken like a couple of years, might be happening in a couple of months, or things you thought that might happen much faster, haven't happened at all, or maybe they are not relevant anymore. Can you
Right.
share some of those examples?
Yeah, 100%. So I think what I'm really fascinated about is now it's almost like giving the most powerful approach for anybody to get an answer on anything that they want, as long as it's within the, you want to apply trust and guardrails, of course. And there is this very intelligent set of sources out there that everybody has access to. So it's democratized. And it's almost up to that individual or up to that business on how much they want to make use of it. So what I'm trying to say is the models are, of course, becoming more powerful and powerful, but all models are only trained by public data, right?
Yes.
What they don't have is the data which is only private and locked within your company's limits. Now, that's the most richest data out there. Every company has their own private data, and that's their gold mine or diamond mine, platinum, whatever you can call it. And how do you make that interact with these models to draw even more value? That's exactly what we are solving with Agentforce, because we are giving the ability for our customers to unlock context and apply it, work it together with the models, and then drive business action. Now, what I'm really amazed by is the pace at which these models are getting better and better. I know we've talked about when will we see artificial general intelligence as a big topic. I certainly thought back when I was studying computer science, I thought artificial general intelligence probably will be much, much beyond my lifetime. But what has surprised me is it's very close. It's very close. But I look at it through a different lens. Of course, there is a personal use of AI that I use on my day-to-day, but in a business context, because you have listeners who are building enterprise level software and stacks, the most amazing thing that I'm looking forward to is the enterprise general intelligence. And we talk about it as EGI, slightly variant from AGI. And what does that mean is every company will be able to maximize the ability for them to do business. Companies who were almost interlocked by not being able to, let's say, grow their business or be limited by the opportunities to serve their customers now have an amazing opportunity. And I think it's that, as you say, peel off the layers. So we are peeling off the layers one by one. That's what I'm amazed about, the speed at which it is happening. And the second part is you don't need uh, a lot of basic compute to get started. That's what is amazing. Like data centers are democratized. Everybody can just easily access a model without actually paying for a large machine for themselves. That surprises me, and I think I'm fascinated by what's about to come on the edge. Like there will come a time when each of our devices will have a model or a AI system that'll be running locally. That'll be very personal, and yeah, I'm looking forward to something on the edge very soon.
Okay. Yeah, this triggers me one question I have from long time,
Go
Ajay,
for it.
is like you said, right? There is a public models, and then once you start using it for a gold mine of the data inside the enterprise, it has to be trained, or it has to start understanding this data and start
Mhm.
answering this context. What happens when you plug in and plug out a different models? Maybe we started using gp3 and we start working on a use case, and then we just suddenly we plug in a different model, or
Mm.
from a different vendor or from a different one. So we do that all the time with the cloud, because
Yes.
it's just a
Yes.
it has no memory. So right, I can take out a server
Mm.
from a Google, I can put a server from the AWS. It's not the same thing, right?
Right.
So every model has its own way. How do
Mm.
you, in your use cases or things you are doing, or from a Salesforce point of view, how does this plug in and plug out of those models work? Or how do you still maintain the same relevance to the customer?
Good. No, it's a good question. And particularly what we are doing today is at best exchanging the context with these models, right? And we are passing it through our trust layer and through the guardrails so that the PII data never leaves and is never available to the model. But it can understand and get that context to be able to make back for the response so that the action at the end of the day is taken back by the agent layer that we have control over, which is Salesforce's layer. What we don't have today is what in your words, what you said, long-term memory. And that is something I think will be the next big evolution in all the software as a service stacks, where we need to start thinking about what is the agent memory looking like. Today, agent memory, if you have to derive it, is nothing but it's looking into the context and the data that's available to it. And if you look at Salesforce's stack, where that agent memory is serving a purpose today is powered by Data Cloud under the hood. And Data Cloud surfaces that context through, even though it could be external applications interacting with an agent, if they have to exchange data, almost gets interfaced through Data Cloud, where we do the RAG and we do the chunking of those, and then it goes out to the model. What we particularly will see, and this is the interesting bit around, as these models continue to switch, what is not fully available today is the learning that this agent would have got. Like, let's say a customer would have interacted with Heathrow, for example, and in WhatsApp, the same agent would have learned so much about the customer. Like Ajay flies through Heathrow once or twice a month or more, and then he prefers to go to the BA launch, he prefers to go to the Virgin Atlantic launch, and this is probably the places where if he arrives early to the airport, he would go. That the agent, over a period of time, you would have interacted, if you have interacted, would have gathered this data. But will it be, is it fully being used to drive other things with an agent wants to drive? Like maybe a brand like Heathrow wants to use it for cross-selling and upselling today? Not yet happening, because that is still in the context of those conversations within an agent. And to your point, if we switch the model, what will happen? That conversation that would have happened with that agent will still be there, but with the new model, you probably will start by initiating a newer conversation, and there will be a newer set of instructions that needs to be sent out. And the long-term memory is the most viable solution and the most resilient solution. And I think the whole industry is thinking about long-term memory, because Salesforce is not in the business of building models. We don't like traditionally build large language models. We of course have SLMs and something called as large action models that we have built from our research projects and now bought it into Salesforce, into our core products. We don't build like the scale of OpenAI's or Google Gemini's kind of a nature of a model, so that we don't do that post-training work based on the agent action. But what we can do is have that agent memory with us at an agent layer, and that's not there yet. Yeah, I think the industry is still progressing in that direction to build it.
Okay, that's interesting to know about this. I'm sure not a lot of people are aware of these things. Coming back to the our core of the podcast is AI and API.
Sure.
So for API practitioners, right? So there is tons of things we might have done over the time, right? So we also went through the same journey, right? So we built APIs early stages for the usability, and now as more and more APIs comes into the picture, we were looking at not only from a usability point of view, even for a monetization point of view, right?
Right.
Similar to what you just explained in the AI case, right now, a lot of use cases are more on the usability side, not from a monetization side. But APIs have matured into the even into the monetization phase of the equation. So a lot of things we do in terms of building the APIs or you are monetizing the APIs. Can you recommend few things what we can fast track, especially from building the APIs point of view or utilization of the API point of view using AI?
Sure. Yeah. No, 100%. I think it's an important journey that each of the API developers or integration developers are undertaking right now. That previously, if you thought about it, even if it is a smaller team, there used to be almost a person who used to design the spec, write the basic specification, and then maybe from the designer to it would have gone to like the core developer of that API, and then of course passed on to like maybe testers team. Of course, that's how the chain flows. But if it's a small team, startups or mid-sized companies where it's just one person doing the whole journey, right? And what I see is the speed up of from a design from thinking of the design of an API to getting that prototype out. I think that whole journey is now accelerated. And you've seen how MuleSoft has deeply embedded by bringing in elements where you could build now Mule APIs and workflows using tools like Cursor. We've integrated that with Cursor, Windsurf, and I think those are the amazingly positive directions for anybody building APIs and integration tool sets, that you will not be spending more time now worrying about the design, because you'll build quick prototypes. You'll have 100 prototypes that you can test, that maybe out of these 100 designs, one or two designs would be the most best, and you can have that choose and pick. Previously, if you had to go through that kind of a even the 10 design iteration, it would take you weeks if not months together. Now you can do it in like a matter of days, like maybe a couple of hours if somebody wants to design quickly. And I think that time is cut out completely. That time is time back to you, time back to the developer, time back to the architect. And from there on, I think you talked about monetization. I would say it's definitely 100% tied to the action that an agent or an AI system would take. Because at the end of the day, what these APIs were all purpose built for is to talk to other applications. You wanted to either exchange data, or you wanted to exchange insights, or more of telemetry based conversations as well. Now if you tie this back into a more AI lens, a lot of this could be fast tracked in the sense of those APIs. If you tie them to an action, there is a clear way that those APIs could be exposed to the external world. Let's imagine MCP. And if you start putting price tag on those APIs per access, per session, then that would be the fastest way. You've probably never seen in the classic API usage or consumption being proliferated, because agents' way of consuming will be much higher in terms of the way in which you can plug it across the board. And beyond that, I think API analytics ties again back into more observability. I can definitely monitor and look at, hey, how many APIs are being used by my agent? Those 10 APIs are not being used at all in calling those actions. Maybe over a period of 6 months to a year, I need to retire those APIs because they're never being used. So you can, as an architect, now take a very good focused decision that this is not very useful, so I might as well retire. And again, retiring or migrating to a newer version again goes back to the first part of the journey. You're going to fast track it because your prototyping or migration journey is again powered by all these vibe coding abilities that we've all got now. And I think it's a great approach.
Okay, sounds good. One thing I want to pick on what you answered is the dynamic calling of the APIs, right? That's not something we not familiar with till the AI comes into picture now. So far it's all about static workflows and things we design the workflows for.
Right.
Now we
Right.
are entering into a world of where dynamically these workflows are built by the AI and calls, and like you said, if now we know which APIs will be useful or not,
Right.
how do you how does current API developers and practitioners or architects has to adopt to this new dynamic? What are the changes they need to do in their architectures to adapt to these dynamic workflows?
So I would almost put this in like a two-stage format. The first stage is always think about the standard interface that is non-negotiable, that you will almost be sure that you will need that, without which there is no entry into that system, which is probably like if you take a banking application, for a customer to actually authorize that he's that person coming into the account, of course they'll need to prove their identity and stuff. So identity layer and authorization layer would definitely be a non-negotiable. And imagine those are the first set of APIs that needs to be invoked by an agent before anything is done further. But from there on, what I would definitely see is, if you go back to how we have thought about it at MuleSoft, we thought about going back to what you said, we thought about API catalog. We thought about the way in which agents could go and look at a pool of APIs available and then go and choose, hey, looks like there's an API for order management. Looks like there's an API for customer service. And it can go and pull it through the pool of APIs. Where we see the industry going is, if you have the right context available. When I say context, it's the instruction set of how to access certain information. Let's say there's no API available for customer onboarding. Let's say very early in the build journey, you've just built 2-3 APIs and you don't have an API for customer onboarding yet. What we will see in the future is AI systems building AI systems, agents building agents. And this second agent that I'm talking about, the one that is getting built up, could be an API that gets created on the fly. And that agent's purpose, once served, that agent might just be destroyed or killed, so that you don't need that anymore. Those are the kind of designs that we will start seeing. And maybe in the API language, we will start seeing dynamic APIs being built by the agent just because it needs to take that action. And when its task is done, purpose is met, just delete it. And imagine the cost saving for companies who are planning to do this, because there's not going to be a long-term running cost for managing and maintaining those APIs, but it's going to be a creation cost. And as we see the value of tokens going lower and lower, the cost of creating those APIs dynamically will also become the best advantage forward. And I would almost see this happening in the next 1 or 2 years, not that far off as well. And that is one of the other exciting things, like dynamic architectures, changing architectures. But always remember the point one, like you need to have a standard interface, which becomes a point of non-negotiation, and beyond which there could be a lot of dynamically evolving pieces.
That's very interesting thought and direction. Yeah, definitely I can see that the whole thought of API lifecycle is going
Yeah,
to change.
it that baffles me quite a lot. Like we might have to write API lifecycle, and the API lifecycle which you write may look very different from the lifecycle that I will write or my company writes. And this again goes back to, there will be thousands of new patterns born that we would have probably not seen or imagined, just because it needs to serve that use case, and that's it. And again, maybe that'll open up doors of how we are building multi-tenanted applications today will probably change, because you don't need that tenancy beyond a point, because that tenancy only needs to be created point in time, purpose is met, tenancy is gone. It's a big shift for cloud as well. I think cloud applications, the way they'll be built in the future, is also going to be drastically different. I'll point to at this time, because we're talking about drastically differently built applications. There's one particular talk I would recommend everybody to listen to. It's by this gentleman named Ilya, who's actually now no longer with OpenAI, but he used to be one of the early members of the co-founding team. And he recently gave a talk in YC. Just Google in YC Ilya and software engineering. And what Ilya has particularly said is, all the software that has been created in the last 15, 20 years, in the next 5 years, 10 years, 70 or 80% of them will be rewritten. So you can imagine the volume of applications, platforms, they will have to be rewritten to actually make it ready or be ready up to the scope of AI. So, which is a clear indication that the software engineering principles that we are writing today are going to be drastically different from what we're going to, your teams and my teams are going to write in 2 years from now. So, it's a very fascinating, changing world that I think it's always going to keep us on the edge.
Okay, definitely. Yeah, we'll try to put that in the notes. Yeah, I think I might have seen it, but I can't recollect.
Sure.
One last thing I want to check on, just because of the time I have to cut it because I have a lot more things I want to ask you, Ajay. Is one thing we work on a lot is on the application rationalization and legacy modernization side. It's still a big pain point for the organizations, and especially if they have to adapt to the AI level of intelligence.
Right.
Data is not there where they want to be, and these integrations and legacy modernizations are not done. These are all a back burner projects. Are you seeing them getting accelerated? If at all, what from your experience, if you have to redo them with the AI, what kind of recommendations you have to fast track those processes?
Yeah. No, that's a important question, and something that I used to juggle with every day while I was on the MuleSoft side: legacy modernization, a stack revamp, and how do you really move somebody who's probably built 10, 15 years ago, and how do you bring them to relevance right now? What we will see and what we are seeing right now is, and you highlighted that really well, data subsystem is definitely key. People who are not data ready are going to be in sort of if you put like tracks, right? Like they're going to be in the slow track because they still have to get a lot of that principles right. And one of the things that I always try to highlight is the three important things. One of the topics that I highlight is three important things: people, process, and technology. We talk about it in our integration space around the COE, Center of Excellence, Center of Enablement, particularly the Muse language. And there's a fourth P that is very important that people don't talk about, and I talk about it more vocally. It's patience. And I think what is really important with these AI subsystems is when you're trying to work with a legacy modernization kind of a use case, you need to really be thorough and patient about what part of that legacy are you willing to move. Like if somebody has an on-premise application, of course you can rewrite a lot of that logic now to be more cloud agnostic and cloud aware. But what are the other hedges and risks and bets that the company is willing to take is a big question. And today we are actually seeing those questions being asked, and people realizing to that earlier fact that I made, that you will have to rewrite your stack or move your stack to modernize, and you cannot probably stay still in the old era by just putting a wrapper around it, because the language of wrappers is going to change drastically. I think eyebrows are being raised now by like legacy CIOs and CTOs who have almost said, hey, I have a banking application that has been running for the last 30 years. On some of it still runs COBOL code from last 40 years. I don't want to change it. But the modern architecture demands some of that change. And for the first time, we are seeing them asking how much of it is actually powered by AI. And I was very surprised when a customer of ours told me that they were able to migrate a Visual Basic application that was written, that didn't even have and VB written in Microsoft pre VB.NET would say. He didn't even have a DLL. He didn't have a dynamic link library, a file, or he didn't even have the source code. He just had a .exe with him, which was written many years ago now, almost 20 plus years ago. He gave that to the model, public model, and it helped him migrate that application, which was his personal financing application that he was running, a small business, mom and pop shop kind of a business. It helped him port it entirely to a Python code and running application in a matter of half an hour. And he said, I did it all without hiring a developer. And I wanted it to be more modernized. It uses MySQL in the backend and Python as the Python and PHP as a flavor there. And imagine that is the kind of migrations that we will see. And I'm deeply fascinated about what impact we will be able to drive for legacy modernization.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ajay. A lot of wonderful thoughts. And any final thoughts or things which you want to share, which I missed from AI and API point of view?
I think I would definitely urge each one of them to experiment. Think about what will it take to design the right architecture, because if you have been an API developer or an API architect, you've always been thinking about, hey, how can the whole purpose of API was to drive reusability, to drive actually efficiency and how applications talk to each other. Now apply the same logic and think about what does it mean in this world of AI. And you'll actually be surprised the different patterns that you'll discover. So don't stop learning. Nobody's an expert. Everybody's learning. I'm learning every day and unlearning some of the old things. So I think that's a vicious cycle. Learn, unlearn. It is a constant loop.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode of AI Meets API. A big thank you to Ajay Kumar for joining us and sharing his insights on AI product management. We appreciate his time and expertise, and we hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. Until next time, stay curious and stay connected.